sermon is, Monday is coming. Well, don't that look like a Monday right there?
Yeah.
That looks like a Monday all day. It's just interesting. I don't even know why this kind of just popped in my mind, and then the Lord just began to give me a lot of different things about this. And I just started thinking too that, Monday is associated with a lot of negative vibes. Oh my God, is it Monday already? We have negative thoughts and vibes about Monday. And I thought about the disciples, because I don't think they really had a good grasp on what Monday represented for them. Because they didn't have social media to tell them how to feel. They didn't have social media to hear from the multitudes about what Monday was really about. All they had is what the Old Testament had told them, the Torah had told them about what would happen with Jesus, and also what Jesus told them. They were with him for 3 years. You think that you know somebody pretty good when you're with them for 3 years, but they still just didn't get the concept. I feel like sometimes we don't either. But anyway, in Matthew, Jesus told them that the Son of Man is going to be killed, and after 3 days, he will rise. But the disciples still did not understand what that meant, and I think they were even just a bit afraid to ask him about it. But just thinking about that a little bit, I started thinking about who they really thought Jesus was. Because a lot of things, it was great when he was with them and they were healing people and great things were happening. They hear good sermons, all of that was happening. But then Jesus gets arrested. Tony talked about that on Easter Sunday, and that on Easter Sunday he arose, but then he's missing from the tomb. And so I was thinking that they completely were probably messed up, because you see, all the Jews at that time, they had this conception of Jesus. What they thought was coming was a conquering king, not a king who was hung on a cross between two thieves. So I think when Jesus' body was missing in the tomb, I'm just doing a little backtracking here with that. I think that what they thought is, okay, well, it's all over, it's said, it's done, we're just going to go back to our normal lives. Monday's coming. That's what they thought. And they just embraced it as it was any other Monday. But what they didn't realize was that it wasn't the end. It was just the beginning.
Amen.
It was just the beginning, and we've reaped the harvest of that beginning here in our lives today. But I want to challenge you today about your Monday mindset. Because it is a mindset. What we feel about Monday is what we choose to feel about Monday in our lives, whatever that might mean. Y'all are looking at me like cows looking at a new gate. like you, just like, where's she going with this? Where is she going to go with this? Well, I'm here to tell you that Jesus did not rise from the grave so that you would have hope from the grave, but he gave you the power to do it. Jesus gave us the power when he rose from the grave. So again, I'm just reminding you that money is a mindset. We feel like that our identity is wrapped up in the wrong things. Your identity is not wrapped up in the choices that you make or what you accomplish, but in Christ's resurrection, what he's made you to be. Well, that sounds a little word salad. I like that term. They use it a lot in politics. It sounds like word salad. I'm going to say it again. Your identity is not in the choices that you make or what you accomplish. Are you with me?
Yes.
But in who Christ's resurrection has made you to be. What does that mean? Jesus' death on the cross represents everything that you were ever told by Satan that you aren't. And his resurrection represents everything that you're meant to be. Does that resonate with you? That totally changes your Monday perception. When he died, he took all of those things that the enemy told you that you weren't to the cross with him. When he rose, he gave you the power to be everything that he said in his word that you could be. That's point for rejoice, people. That's point for rejoice.
Amen.
And I'm telling you that we've all experienced a bad Monday. A bad Monday. Yes. I mean, I think everybody's probably remembering it just as we speak. But part of the bad Monday can come from the fact that we are in spiritual dryness. You're in a place of spiritual dryness can affect what your Monday outcome is. Before you get a stiff neck, consider this. Some of y'all gonna get that in a minute. Having spiritual dryness, it happened to Thomas. He doubted. It happened to Peter. He denied. And it probably happened to all the other disciples, but it just didn't get published in the most popular book of all time. But I'm quite sure that all of the disciples experienced a bad Monday and a place of spiritual dryness. It also happened to a man named John Wesley. If you don't know who he is, he's the man that started the Methodist Church. Very spiritually in tune, smart man. But even he experienced spiritual dryness once. And he wrote something to this effect to his brothers. I don't know if I even believe in God. I don't know if I ever have. This is a man who started the Methodist movement. And while that sounds like a spiritual disaster coming from a spiritual master, it was probably not even a moment of spiritual failure, but a moment of deep longing for honesty. You know, and if we're all honest with us, we know that we do experience spiritual dryness, we experience bad Mondays. But I like what a friend advised him during the midst of that time. He said, preach faith to the habit. And maybe that's something that all of us could tell ourselves tomorrow morning on Monday. Preach faith until you have it. You don't always, it's not always just there. Sometimes we have to build up our faith. Maybe you're the exception. Maybe you have never felt like your faith was on life support. Maybe you never felt like that your faith needed a respirator. But many of us have, and so I just want to ask you, if you're that person, maybe you'll just continue to listen, because a lot of us have felt like our faith is like wiggle bread in here. I know I can speak to that for my own life, but I just want to remind you that in those times, it's in those times sometimes that we have to do our Christian walk out of obedience rather than faith. I feel like that a really good illustration of this. Well, I'm going to say one more thing before I say this. In those times of faith as well, I feel like that you do yourself a favor to remember and to tell yourself that you're not who you used to be, even if you're not who you want to be. Amen.
Good word, Vicki.
Amen.
All right? I mean, that's a part of the growth thing, not being who you used to be, but maybe you're not quite there where you want to be. Okay? But the story of the prophet Elijah gives a good illustration of where I want to go here. He was an Old Testament prophet who predicted famine in the land during the days of some pretty bad leadership. And in the midst of that famine, Elijah got provided for in a very miraculous way. He was living beside a stream, and the ravens brought him meat twice a day. That'd be good, wouldn't it? If ravens brought us meat. I can't help it. I just had a bad thought here. We've had a nuisance squirrel. He was not bringing us meat. He was stealing cat food. He was so bad, and he was chewing up our animals' food containers, and he was not the raven, I'll just say that. And so anyway, he went to see Jesus. I believe he's living well. I believe he's living well. He's getting all that he ever needed. All right, back to Elijah. He's camping out beside the stream, and the ravens are bringing him bread and meat twice a day. And he's got the provision of what's in the stream. He's a happy man. He could just stay there and be happy till the cows come home, we say in Texas. All right? And sometimes faith comes like that. Sometimes we just happy to stay here and feed on the supernatural provision while everything else is falling to pieces around us at times. Sometimes we get the parking space by the door, the checks in the mail, and peace that passes all understanding. And we've not done a diddly dang to deserve it. And in those seasons, we have nothing to do but be only grateful. But then sometimes that stream dries up. Sometimes it dries up because we're disconnected. Sometimes it dries up because somebody upstream built a dam. And it dries up because God just wants us to learn something in it. But it takes great faith to cling to Jesus while all kinds of things are wreaking havoc in our life. In Elijah's story, it's the dried up brook that moved him into the flow of Jesus. The brook dried up, and Elijah, if he's going to survive, well, he had to move on. Away from the stream, away from the raven bringing food. He had to move on. I know that had to be very hard, and it probably seems very unmerciful of a good thing, having to move on. But this is where Elijah went to really be in the higher calling that God called him to. Because in the process, he befriends a widow. And you all have heard the story. I'm not going to go into it. But she provides food while she's setting him up for the path that God is calling him to. This is where Elijah learned to flow in the path that God called him to. Let me tell you something. Sometimes dried up brooks are seasons to be weathered. Sometimes it is a voice to be ignored. But sometimes God dries up the brook so we will be motivated to move on from the brook to the river.
Come on, good
That's a
word.
good word.
Wow.
Yeah.
I think that's what Jesus might have been talking about when he said in John 12:24, y'all look at there's no PowerPoint. You have to depend on me. You have to listen to me. You have to listen, but there are little note cards in front of your seat if you want to take notes. Please feel free to take notes. This is good stuff. I think this is what Jesus was talking about when he said in John 12:24, I tell you the truth, unless a seed falls into the earth and dies, it remains alone. But if it dies, it bears much fruit. You need to let that sink into you for just a minute, because God's trying to tell you something this morning. He's trying to tell you that sometimes things have to die to bring forth the fruit.
That's right.
What moves God to bring dead things back to life? In the Mondays. I can attest to something here. Many of you know, because Tony has said it from the pulpit, we're pretty transparent around here. If some crappy thing that Tony and I went through helps you to get to a better place in Jesus, I'm willing to share my trash. And when Tony and I were in a place, a bad place in our marriage, we shared many times. We were there for a long time. We were actually about 3 days away from getting a divorce when God spoke to Tony to go home. But in the midst of that year that we were apart, I don't remember how far into it, but it was somewhere during the course of that time, I had a dream. And I dreamed that Tony and I were driving, and we were up on this big mountain. You know, one of those kinds that has little narrow roads with no guardrails? Mm-hmm. You've seen it? We were on that road. And I was driving, and Tony was in the passenger seat, and we weren't even talking to each other. We were just riding. And then the car just went over the cliff. And I woke up feeling so very disturbed, like, we're gonna die, we're gonna die. But neither one of us cried, screamed, yelled, begged God, nothing. We just went over the cliff. And for all practical purposes in my mind, I couldn't see the bottom. I would say that we died. But here's the truth. You ready? We did die. He died. I died so that Christ could live in us. Because the people who we were not good people. They were selfish people. So I'm telling you this, that sometimes, no, not sometimes, all the time, we should be dying to self. Yes. Sometimes it's time to leave that comfy little brook or stream and go to the river for God's bigger purpose and plan. Amen. Maybe it's when we allow ourselves to see beyond the brook, to see what God is doing elsewhere. Sometimes the brook dries up and seeds die, so we will be motivated to move on. And I think that this is a good time to ask ourselves, is it possible that my spiritual dryness is connected to an unwillingness in myself to let God do a new thing? Is that where you are? Are you there? I'm unwilling to let God do a new thing because God's saying, I don't want you to do this anymore. I want you to do this. Is that where you are? Is that a possibility that that could have something to do with your spiritual dryness? Kate, I'm doing so good. I'm going to be here for just a minute, but it's okay to go ahead and come. Jesus was teaching on a hill. Nothing really spectacular was happening during that time. There was a bunch of people sitting around him as disciples, a bunch of other men and women, children, Roman soldiers, Jewish leaders. They're all waiting to see the profound thing that Jesus has to say. Jesus took a deep breath and he began. It's Matthew 5, 3 through 10. How blessed are the poor in spirit, for the kingdom of heaven is theirs. How blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. How blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the land. How blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. How blessed are those who show mercy, for they will be shown mercy. How blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. How blessed are those who make peace, for they will be called the sons of God. How blessed are those who are persecuted, because they pursue righteousness, for the kingdom of heaven is theirs. This is what we affectionately refer to as the Sermon on the Mount. Well, everything that Jesus said there was so amazing. It's a life-changing truth. A couple of things caught my attention in reading it. Talk about a case of the spiritual Mondays. The first two lines. How blessed are the poor in spirit, for the kingdom of heaven is theirs. How blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. How blessed are the poor in spirit? That sounds so counterintuitive. It doesn't sound right that you could call that to be blessed. What is Jesus talking about? And then he said, for those who mourn are blessed. It doesn't feel like we're blessed. It feels like promised but us.
Yes.
The people that mourn are the people that have lost. They're suffering. Their life is spoiled and turned upside down. What is he talking about? Later on in the Gospels, Jesus tells of one of the religious leaders in Israel. He's telling one of the religious leaders in Israel, I didn't come for the righteous people. I came for the unrighteous. The healthy people don't need a doctor. It's the people who are sick, the people who are hurting, the people who are dying who need the physician. That's in Matthew 9. In a Sermon on the Mount, Jesus is saying there's something special, amazing, and beautiful about a broken person. Because if you're sick and in need, if you hurt, if you're depressed, if you're crushed, if you're poor in spirit or mourning, or if you just flat out stuck on that Monday, you're now in a place to be healed and changed by God. Because when all is well, we pat ourselves on the back. Paul wrote that it's in our weakness, in our failures, in our brokenness, that God's able to move in all of his glorious power. Because there's something extraordinary about being in a place where God can do something spectacular. Being poor in spirit, being in mourning, having a case of the Mondays, puts you in a unique position where only the medicine of God can help you. And Tony and I are an testament to that. We were not sermon people. We were not preacher material. We were not pastor material. We couldn't even take care of our own life, much less help lead other people to a place of healing and wholeness. We were a train wreck, okay? We were as broken's gonna get. But God. But God. I can tell you 100%. God is speaking to every single person in this house this morning, and he's saying to you, I had good plans for you. Your future is bright.
Yes.
And you're going to have a life of joy.
Yes.
But you got to choose to not do the Monday.
Right.
The way you've always been doing the Monday. And I hear some of you already saying, feeling like it's been a week of Mondays. But I'm just here to tell you, Monday's just one day. It's just one day. And you need to see it like that.